It was a chilly evening in early spring, and the grand ballroom of the Hillcrest Hotel glowed with soft golden lights. Inside, the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and slow jazz filled the air. The place was packed with the city's wealthiest, business owners, lawyers, socialites, all dressed in glittering clothes that caught the light as they moved. Everyone had come to support a charity event that promised elegance, luxury, and fine entertainment. Moving quietly among them was a young waitress wearing a crisp white shirt and black vest. Her steps were light, careful, her smile polite but distant. She balanced a tray of drinks with ease even though she'd been on her feet for hours. Her eyes occasionally drifted toward the corner of the room, where a grand piano sat on a small stage. The pianist, an older man with silver hair, played smooth melodies that wrapped the evening in warmth. Each time the notes floated through the air, something in her chest stirred. A memory, perhaps, or a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She had loved the piano once. Loved it deeply, like it was a part of her. But life had other plans. She had left that world behind long ago, choosing instead to take whatever job she could find to help her family stay afloat. This waitress job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and the tips were good enough to pay the bills. She had learned to hide the part of her that missed the music. Yet tonight, surrounded by the sound of the piano, that part of her refused to stay quiet. "Hey, can we get another round here?" a man called out from one of the tables. She quickly turned away from her thoughts and hurried over. The man speaking was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His watch gleamed under the light. There was something sharp in his smile, a kind of arrogance that filled the space around him. He was a successful businessman, known for his confidence and his habit of showing off whenever possible. Around him sat a group of friends who laughed a little too loudly at every word he said. She nodded politely, refilled their glasses, and turned to walk away. But then the man caught her looking, just for a second, toward the piano again. "You like the music?" he asked, his tone teasing, loud enough for the others to hear. She hesitated. "Yes, sir. It's beautiful." "Beautiful, huh?" he said with a grin. "You play?" Her heart skipped. "I used to," she said quietly. The man leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. "Used to? What happened? Couldn't keep up with the professionals?" His friends chuckled. She forced a polite smile. "No, life just took me another way." He raised an eyebrow. "Well, we've got a grand piano right here," he said, motioning toward the stage. "Why don't you show us what you've got? Or are you afraid?" The laughter grew around the table. She froze, unsure how to respond. Her first instinct was to walk away, to ignore the joke and get back to work. But his tone wasn't kind, it was mocking, meant to humiliate her. The people at the nearby tables had started to notice the exchange. Even the pianist had slowed his playing, glancing over curiously. Her manager, standing near the bar, frowned slightly but didn't step in. She could tell he didn't want to make a scene. The man's grin widened. "Come on," he said again. "You said you used to play. Let's see if that's true. Or maybe you were just saying it to sound interesting." The people at his table were watching her now, some whispering. She felt her face heat up. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I don't think that's appropriate, sir," she said softly, still trying to keep her voice calm. "Oh, come on," he said, laughing. "It's just a bit of fun. We could all use some entertainment. Tell you what, if you can play something decent, I'll give $500 to the charity tonight. Sound fair?" That got the crowd's attention. Heads turned, people started murmuring, and suddenly it wasn't just a joke between them. It had become a public dare. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to walk away and keep her dignity, but she also knew that if she refused, they would laugh about it for the rest of the night. Something inside her, that quiet strength she thought she had buried long ago, began to rise. She looked at the piano. It gleamed under the soft lights, its ivory keys smooth and inviting. She hadn't touched one in years, but her fingers still remembered the weight of each note. She took a slow breath. "All right," she said quietly. "Just for a moment." The man blinked, surprised she'd accepted. "Oh, really? Well then," he said loudly, clapping his hands. "Everyone, our lovely waitress has agreed to play for us." The pianist stepped aside politely, giving her space. The room filled with a mix of curiosity and doubt. People whispered, some smiling, some shaking their heads. To them, it probably seemed like a moment of amusement, a poor waitress trying to impress the rich. She walked up the small steps to the stage, feeling hundreds of eyes following her. The air seemed heavier now, thick with expectation. She wiped her palms on her apron, took a seat on the piano bench, and stared down at the keys. The last time she had sat before a piano like this, she had been a different person, a hopeful student, dreaming of music schools and concerts, her parents cheering her on. Then everything changed. Her father had fallen ill, her mother had struggled to make ends meet, and she had dropped out to work. Her dream had slowly faded, replaced by long shifts and quiet nights. But sitting there now, she felt that spark again, faint but real. She closed her eyes and let her hands rest on the keys. For a moment, she didn't move. The room was completely still. The man who had challenged her leaned back in his chair, smirking, confident that she'd stumble or freeze. Then, she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they carried a warmth that silenced even the whispers. The melody unfolded slowly, like a story being told after years of silence. Her fingers moved with surprising confidence, as though the music had been waiting inside her all this time, just waiting for the chance to be heard again. The sound filled the room, rich, emotional, alive. It wasn't the kind of showy performance the guests were used to. It was something deeper. Each note seemed to hold a memory, a piece of her journey. The chatter, the laughter, the arrogance, all of it faded. The millionaire's grin slowly slipped away as he watched, his expression changing from amusement to awe. The song grew stronger, her movements graceful and fluid. Every emotion she had buried, the exhaustion, the frustration, the longing, flowed through her hands into the keys. The air around her seemed to shimmer with the sound. For those few minutes, she wasn't a waitress. She wasn't someone who served drinks or cleared plates. She was a musician again, someone who could make people feel something real. As the music carried on, people began to lean forward, completely captivated. The man's friends stopped laughing. The guests who had been chatting over cocktails turned their attention to her, their expressions softening. Even the staff had paused in their work, watching from the corners of the room. When she reached the final notes, her hands trembled slightly. The melody came to a gentle end, fading like a whisper. She sat still for a moment, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. Then, silence. And suddenly, applause. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until the whole room was clapping. Some guests even stood, cheering and whistling. She blinked in disbelief, her chest tightening as tears threatened to fall. The businessman who had mocked her earlier was now clapping too, his face flushed. He looked around awkwardly, then forced a smile. "Well," he said, trying to laugh it off. "Guess I owe that 500. She gave a small nod, rising from the piano bench. Her co-workers beamed at her from across the room. The pianist who had stepped aside gave her a respectful nod of approval. As she walked back toward the kitchen, people continued to cheer. She could feel the warmth of their admiration following her. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt seen, not for what she did, but for who she truly was. Behind her, the millionaire watched silently, realizing that his attempt to humiliate her had only revealed his own arrogance. In that moment, he understood something that money could never buy. True talent doesn't wear fancy clothes or need approval. It simply exists, quietly, powerfully, and beautifully. And the waitress, with her simple heart and long-forgotten dream, had just reminded everyone of that truth. After that night, the entire hotel seemed to feel different. The next morning, people were still talking about what had happened. Staff members who hadn't even been working during the event had already heard the story about the waitress who silenced a crowd of wealthy guests and made a man eat. His own words with nothing but a piano. She arrived early for her next shift, as she always did. Her uniform was neatly pressed and her hair was tied back. She didn't expect any special treatment. She assumed the world had already moved on. But as soon as she stepped through the employee entrance, her co-workers turned to her with wide smiles. "You really did it," one of them whispered. "Everyone's talking about it." Another added. Even the hotel manager mentioned it in the morning meeting. He said the guests were amazed. She smiled shyly and thanked them, but deep down she didn't quite know how to process it. For years she'd been invisible, just another worker in the background taking orders and smiling politely. But now people were actually looking at her differently. When she walked past the ballroom later that day, the memory of the night before came rushing back. The empty piano stood quietly under the spotlight, the same place where everything had changed. She paused just for a moment and ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the instrument. The cool surface brought back the feeling of the keys under her hands, the music that had poured out like something she'd been holding in for years. Before she could drift too far into her thoughts, a voice interrupted her. "I was hoping I'd catch you here," said the event organizer, walking toward her with a friendly smile. He thanked her for stepping in and told her that many guests had written compliments about her in their feedback forms. Some even asked if she would perform again at future events. She blinked in surprise, unsure what to say. "Oh, I don't think I could," she said softly. "I'm just a waitress." He shook his head. "You're more than that. You've got something special. People felt it. You should think about it." After he left, she stood there quietly, staring at the piano again. The words echoed in her mind. "You've got something special." It was something she hadn't heard in years. Later that evening, when her shift ended, she sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment. Her younger brother was finishing homework, and her mother was folding laundry nearby. They had a simple, cozy home, not much space but full of warmth. "How was work?" her mother asked without looking up. "It was fine," she replied with a smile. "Busy." But her brother, scrolling on his phone, suddenly looked up. "Wait, was that you on the internet?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned the screen toward her.
There, on a social media page, was a short video clip from the gala.
Someone had recorded her performance. The caption read, "Waitress stuns millionaire and guests with beautiful piano performance." It had already been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in, people calling her inspiring, talented, unbelievable. Her mother gasped softly. "That's you?" She nodded slowly, feeling both embarrassed and proud. "I didn't know anyone filmed it." Her brother grinned. "You're famous now. Everyone's talking about it." She laughed, shaking her head. No, that's just a video. It'll disappear in a few days," but she was wrong. Over the next week, the video spread like wildfire. News outlets shared it. Bloggers wrote articles about it, and people all over the world commented about her story. Some called her the piano waitress. Others said she reminded them that real talent can come from anywhere. The hotel started receiving calls from people who wanted to book events there, just to meet her. Some guests even came to dine, hoping she'd be there. The millionaire who had challenged her also returned a few days later. He wasn't the same smug man she'd seen before. When he found her in the hallway, he looked awkward, holding a small envelope in his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was out of line that night. I shouldn't have put you on the spot like that." She didn't quite know how to respond, so she simply nodded. "It's all right," she said. He handed her the envelope. "I meant what I said about donating. Here's the proof, and I added a little extra in your name." Inside was a receipt for a large donation to the local music education fund, far more than the $500 he had promised. "That's very kind of you," she said, genuinely touched. He hesitated before speaking again. "You've got something rare. Don't let this moment slip away. People need to hear you play again." That night she couldn't sleep. The words of so many people echoed in her head. Her co-workers, the organizer, even the man who once mocked her. For the first time in years, she felt something stirring inside her. A quiet voice asking, "What if this isn't the end? What if it's the beginning?" A few days later, the hotel hosted another event, a smaller dinner for local business owners. The manager approached her before her shift began. "The guests asked if you'd play again tonight," he said gently. "Only if you want to." Her hands felt cold, but she smiled. "All right," she said softly. "I'll try." When the time came, she sat down at the piano once more. The lights were dim, the audience smaller, but the feeling was the same, a mix of fear and excitement. As she began to play, the room filled with that same quiet magic. This time, though, she wasn't just trying to prove something. She was playing because it made her feel alive. The guests applauded again, and afterward, one of them, a music teacher from a local academy, approached her. He introduced himself warmly and told her that he'd seen her video online. "We'd love to offer you a place in our evening music program," he said. "It's for adults who left music behind but want to return. You've clearly got talent. You just need a chance to polish it." Her heart raced. "I don't know if I can afford something like that," she said honestly. He smiled. It's a scholarship program. You don't have to pay. We just ask for your commitment. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I would love that. From that moment on, her life began to shift. She worked her shifts during the day and attended music classes in the evening. The first few weeks were tough. Her fingers were stiff, her reading rusty, and she often came home exhausted. But every night she practiced even when her hands ached. Her mother would sometimes sit nearby, listening quietly, a proud smile on her face. One evening, her music teacher asked her to perform a short solo at a small recital. It wasn't a fancy event, just students, teachers, and a few family members, but to her, it felt like standing on the biggest stage in the world. When she finished playing, the applause she received wasn't as loud as the galas, but it felt more meaningful. These people weren't clapping for a viral moment. They were clapping for her journey, for the courage it took to start again. After the recital, her teacher said something that stayed with her. You have a gift, he told her. But what makes it special isn't just your skill, it's your heart. People don't just hear your music. They feel your story in it. Weeks turned into months, and her story continued to spread. She was invited to perform at small community events, charity dinners, and even a few local TV shows. Each time she told her story humbly, reminding everyone that sometimes life takes you far from your dreams. But if you keep them alive in your heart, they find a way back to you. Through it all, she remained the same gentle, grounded person she'd always been. She still worked at the hotel part-time, still helped her family, still smiled at guests. But now, when she looked at the piano, she no longer saw a memory of what she lost. She saw a reminder of what she had found again. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of something much greater. As weeks turned into months, her life slowly began to transform. What had started as a simple act of courage on one unforgettable night had opened doors she never imagined possible. She still worked at the hotel, but now her evenings were filled with something she had thought she'd lost forever: music. Each day, she woke up early, helped her mother, worked her shift, and then headed to her evening piano classes. It wasn't easy. Her body ached from long hours of standing, and sometimes her fingers cramped from playing late into the night. But every time she sat in front of the piano, all the exhaustion faded. The moment her fingers touched the keys, she felt whole again. Her teacher often told her that her music carried something rare, real emotion. You don't just play notes, he said once. You make people feel what you've lived. She never quite knew how to respond to that. All she knew was that every time she played, she poured her heart into it. Her classmates admired her too. Some of them came from wealthy families. Others were hobbyists, but they all seemed to respect her quiet determination. She never tried to compete or show off. She just wanted to get better, day by day. One evening, after class, her teacher announced an upcoming charity concert organized by the Music Academy. It would feature both students and professional musicians, and all proceeds would go toward funding instruments for underprivileged children. He looked directly at her when he mentioned it. You should play, he said gently. You have something special to share. Her heart raced. The thought of performing in front of a real audience again scared her, but also thrilled her. Do you really think I'm ready? She asked. He smiled. You're more than ready, and I think people need to hear your story. At home, she told her family about the concert. Her mother's eyes filled with pride. You've worked so hard, she said softly. No matter what happens, I'm already proud of you. Her younger brother grinned. I'll record it this time. Maybe it'll go viral again. She laughed, shaking her head. I'm not doing it for that. I just want to play. The days leading up to the concert were full of nerves and excitement. She practiced every spare minute she had, often staying after her shift to use the hotel's piano when the ballroom was empty. The same grand piano that once made her nervous now felt like an old friend. Sometimes, when the hotel lobby was quiet late at night, she'd sit there in the dim light, letting her hands wander across the keys. A few guests would pause to listen, their faces softening with quiet wonder. Those moments reminded her why she loved music. It connected people in a way words never could. When the night of the charity concert finally arrived, she could hardly believe she was part of the lineup. The event was held in a local theater, not as grand as the hotel ballroom, but still beautiful. The soft glow of stage lights and the gentle hum of the crowd filled her with a mix of fear and joy. Backstage, she could hear other performers warming up. Her heart pounded as she adjusted her dress, a simple one her mother had saved for special occasions. Her teacher found her just before it was her turn to go on. "You'll be fine," he said kindly. "Just breathe. Play like no one's watching. Play for yourself." She nodded, taking a deep breath. When her name was announced, the audience applauded politely. She stepped out under the lights, the piano gleaming before her. The sight made her pause for a moment. For a second, she remembered that night at the hotel. The laughter, the challenge, the fear, and how everything had changed because she had chosen to be brave. She sat down, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes echoed softly through the theater, delicate yet full of strength. The piece she had chosen wasn't famous. It was one she had written herself in her small apartment, late at night when the world was quiet. It was a piece about starting over, about loss, hope, and rediscovery. The music rose and fell like a story being told without words. Every person in the audience seemed to feel it, the emotion, the honesty, the courage in each note. Some closed their eyes, others leaned forward, completely still. By the time she played the final note, a silence filled the room. A beautiful, heavy silence that needed no applause to prove what everyone had felt. Then slowly, the audience began to clap, and soon the sound swelled into a standing ovation. She looked up, startled, tears welling in her eyes. People were on their feet, cheering, smiling, some even wiping away tears. In the front row, her teacher clapped proudly, his face glowing with pride. After the performance, many people came up to her to thank her for the music. Some said it moved them deeply. Others simply smiled and told her she had something rare. One woman, an older lady with kind eyes, took her hand and said softly, "You reminded me that it's never too late to follow your dream." Those words stayed with her. The next day, she returned to work at the hotel as usual. Despite her growing recognition, she still loved the quiet rhythm of her job. Her coworkers teased her affectionately, saying she was becoming a celebrity, but she didn't see it that way. She just saw herself as the same person she'd always been, someone who worked hard, cared deeply, and loved music. A few days later, the hotel manager called her into his office. She worried for a second, thinking something might be wrong, but his expression was warm. "You've brought a lot of attention to this place," he said with a smile. "Guests keep asking about you. Some of them even want to attend events just to hear you play. I was thinking, maybe we can turn that into something good. How would you feel about performing here once a week? We could make it a small event for guests and locals. You'd still have your regular job if you want, but you'd also get paid to perform." Her heart swelled. "I'd love that," she said softly. And just like that, her life shifted again. Every Friday evening, the hotel ballroom transformed into something special. The lights dimmed, the tables were arranged neatly, and the grand piano stood at the center. Guests gathered not just for the fine dining or elegant atmosphere, but to listen to the waitress who played like she carried 1,000 stories in her hands. She performed simple pieces, some classical, some of her own. Each song carried a piece of her journey, and every time she played, people listened with full hearts. One night after her performance, a man approached her. He introduced himself as a producer for a small record label that specialized in promoting real talent, musicians with genuine stories, not commercial fame. "I saw your video months ago," he said. "And then I came here tonight just to see if it was real. And it is. You have something pure. Would you consider recording an album?" She stared at him, stunned. "An album?" she repeated softly. He nodded. "Nothing big or fancy. Just your story and music. People would love it." She didn't answer right away. It was hard to believe that someone who once carried trays around a ballroom was now being asked to record her own music. "I'll think about it," she said finally, smiling shyly. When she told her mother later that night, her mother hugged her tightly. "See," she whispered. "All those years you thought life had forgotten your dream. It was just waiting for the right time." And maybe her mother was right. Because for the first time in years, she no longer felt like someone waiting for life to happen. She was living it, fully, deeply, and honestly. Her music had given her a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. That week, she wrote a new song. It wasn't complicated or grand. It was gentle, full of gratitude, and it told her story. From the quiet waitress serving the rich, to the woman who found her voice again through the keys of a piano. When she played it for her teacher, he sat in silence for a long moment after it ended. Then he smiled. That's the sound of someone who finally found herself. And she had. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of what came next. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for sure. As long as she had a piano and a heart full of stories, she would never be lost again. Months passed, and her life continued to change in ways she could never have imagined. The hotel's Friday night piano evenings had become the talk of the town. People from different places came to listen to her, some locals, some travelers, and some who had just heard about the waitress who played like her soul was on fire. Every week she tried to bring something new. Sometimes she played classical pieces, sometimes her own songs, and sometimes gentle melodies that she composed while sitting alone in her small living room. Her music didn't need grand words or explanations. It carried warmth, honesty, and emotion. The crowd always responded the same way. Silence during the music and loud applause when the final note faded. But deep down, she didn't play for fame or recognition. She played because it made her feel alive. Each note reminded her of where she came from and how far she had come. One evening, just as she finished performing, a middle-aged woman approached her. She was dressed elegantly but had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "You don't know me," the woman said softly, "but I've heard you play before. You remind me of someone I used to know, a dear friend who loved music but gave it up too soon." The woman paused, then added, "I work with a foundation that supports young musicians who can't afford instruments or lessons. Would you consider partnering with us? Maybe play at our events or help raise awareness?" She was surprised by the offer. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself. "I'm not famous or anything." The woman smiled. "You don't need to be famous. You just need to care. People listen when you play, not because of your name, but because they feel your heart in every note." That night, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea of helping young people who were struggling the way she once had filled her with quiet excitement. The next day, she agreed to meet the woman's team. A few weeks later, she found herself performing at a small community event held in a park. There was no fancy stage or bright lights, just a few benches, a modest sound system, and a rented upright piano. But something about the simplicity of it all made it even more special. Children sat cross-legged on the grass, families clapped along, and the laughter of little ones filled the air between songs. After the event, she stayed behind to talk to the kids. One boy, maybe 10 years old, stood near the piano staring at the keys. "Do you play?" she asked him gently. He shook his head. "No, we don't have a piano," she smiled. "I didn't have one either for a long time. But one day you will. And when you do, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about telling your story." The boy nodded, and for a moment, she saw her younger self in his eyes, hopeful, shy, and full of dreams. Performing at those community events became her favorite part of the month. They weren't grand or glamorous, but they were real. Each time she met someone new, a struggling artist, a hopeful student, a tired parent who found peace in the music. Her name slowly started to spread beyond the city. A few online articles were written about her, calling her the woman who turned a challenge into a calling. Some people recognized her when she walked through the market or took the bus. It felt strange but also humbling. She always smiled and thanked anyone who stopped her. Though deep inside she still saw herself as the same waitress who once stood trembling before a crowd. One evening, as she was preparing for another Friday night performance at the hotel, the manager approached her with an excited look. "There's someone special coming tonight," he said. "You'll want to know this. A famous concert pianist is staying here and he's heard about you. He asked if he could attend your show." Her eyes widened. She had read about that pianist before. He was known all over the country, performing in grand concert halls, teaching at top music academies. The idea that someone like him would come to hear her play was almost unbelievable. When the evening began, she tried to stay calm. The ballroom was packed as usual, the lights soft, the air warm with anticipation. She played her first few pieces as she always did, slowly, gracefully letting the music flow from her heart. Afterward, the famous pianist approached her. He was tall and kind-eyed, his expression thoughtful. "You play beautifully," he said. "Your technique is raw, but your emotion is rare. That's something no one can teach." She blushed. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." He smiled.
Have you ever thought about studying again?
"Proper training could help you refine your gift. I have a small workshop for musicians who play with heart, not just skill." "You'd fit perfectly." The offer left her speechless. I don't know if I could, she said honestly. I still work here and I help my family. I can't just leave everything. He nodded with understanding. I'm not asking you to leave. Just to grow. Sometimes life gives us second chances. You shouldn't be afraid to take them. Those words echoed in her mind for days. She talked it over with her mother, who listened quietly. I think he's right, her mother said. You've given so much of yourself to everyone else. Maybe now it's time to do something for you. And so, with a mix of excitement and fear, she joined the pianist's weekend workshop. The training was intense, long hours of practice, focus, and feedback. But she loved it. She felt like a student again, learning things she had only dreamed of before. Her mentor pushed her beyond her limits, not to break her, but to help her realize how much she was capable of. You've lived your music, he told her once. Now let's shape it so the whole world can hear it. As she improved, her confidence grew. Her performances at the hotel became even more captivating. Guests who had heard her before noticed the difference. Her touch was smoother, her sound more balanced, but the emotion remained just as powerful. Soon, she was invited to perform at a city music festival, a chance to play not as a waitress, but as a real musician on stage alongside professionals. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The day of the festival arrived faster than she expected. The large concert hall buzzed with people, lights, and excitement. When her turn came, she took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The crowd quieted, waiting. She sat at the piano, her fingers trembling slightly. But as soon as she began to play, everything else disappeared, the noise, the fear, the crowd. It was just her and the music. Her song was one she had written about her journey, about courage, kindness, and rediscovery. The melody was soft at first, then powerful, then quiet again, like life itself. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, and tears filled her eyes. Her mentor was in the front row, smiling proudly. That night, when she returned home, she didn't feel like a different person. She still felt like herself, the same girl who once wiped tables and dreamed quietly of something more. But now she knew one thing for certain. She had turned her pain into purpose, her fear into strength, and her silence into music. Her story spread even further after that. She received letters from strangers, students, parents, and musicians, telling her how her journey had inspired them. Some said they started learning an instrument because of her. Others said her story reminded them to never give up, no matter how far they had fallen behind. She kept every letter, storing them in a small wooden box on her nightstand. Whenever she felt tired or doubtful, she opened that box and read a few lines. It reminded her that even small acts of courage can echo far beyond what we see. And so she continued, working, playing, teaching, and helping others. Her dream had finally found its place in the world. But she never forgot where it began. In a crowded ballroom under bright lights, with trembling hands and a heart full of hope. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of what came next, because now she knew that every challenge, every stumble, and every song was part of something bigger, a story still being written, one note at a time. Time had passed, and the seasons seemed to move faster than ever. The young woman who had once worked quietly behind a counter now stood confidently on stages, sharing her music with people who truly listened. Yet she never saw herself as someone famous. To her, she was still that same ordinary person with an extraordinary dream that had somehow found its way to life. The festival performance had opened many doors for her. Invitations started arriving, small concerts, charity events, interviews. But she didn't say yes to everything. She was careful about what she chose. Her heart still belonged to those intimate moments where people connected through sound rather than spotlight. One day, she received an invitation that felt different from the rest. It was from a well-known music conservatory that wanted her to speak and perform for their graduating class. The letter said, "We believe your story can inspire our students. We would be honored if you could share it." She smiled when she read it. Years ago, she would have never imagined that her story would matter to anyone. She accepted the invitation without hesitation. The event took place in a grand auditorium filled with young musicians. As she walked onto the stage, she could feel the weight of all those eyes on her. Some students whispered softly. Others smiled in recognition. She began with a soft introduction, her voice trembling slightly at first. "I don't come from a place of fame or money," she said. "I used to serve tables. I used to watch people live the life I dreamed of, and I thought maybe it wasn't meant for me. But life has a funny way of testing how much you believe in yourself, and sometimes one small act of courage can change everything. Then she played. The melody was gentle, almost like a lullaby. The students listened in complete silence, their faces reflecting awe and emotion. Some closed their eyes. Others leaned forward as if afraid to miss a single note. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. But what touched her most was not the noise. It was the quiet moment right before it, when she could feel that her music had reached them. Afterward, several students came up to her asking for advice. One of them, a young woman with nervous hands, said, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm good enough to keep going. It's so hard to stay motivated." She looked at her kindly. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be honest. Music doesn't come from skill alone, it comes from your heart. Don't give up because you're scared. The world needs your voice even if it trembles." Her words stayed with the students long after she left. The conservatory posted her performance online, and within weeks it reached thousands of views. People from around the world began commenting, saying how her story reminded them of their own struggles. But even as her popularity grew, she remained humble. Every Friday night, she still returned to the same hotel where it all began. The staff welcomed her like family, and the guests still filled the room with warmth and anticipation. One night, while she was playing, she noticed an older man sitting quietly in the back. He had a worn-out hat and tired eyes, but he smiled every time she looked up. After her performance, he approached her. "You probably don't remember me," he said with a gentle laugh. "But I was there the first night you played here. I was sitting at that corner table near the window." Her eyes widened. She did remember, a man who had clapped the loudest when she had first accepted that challenge to play. "I remember you," she said softly. "You were one of the first people who believed in me that night." He chuckled. "I didn't just believe. I saw something in you. I could tell your music came from somewhere real." He paused, then added, "You've come a long way. But don't ever stop being that same person who played just because she loved it." She nodded, smiling warmly. "I won't." That night, as she walked home, she thought about everything that had happened. The challenge, the applause, the people she had met, the opportunities that followed. Every step of the journey had been unpredictable, but it had shaped her into someone she was proud to be. Her mother, who had supported her quietly through it all, was now in better health. The two of them often spent evenings together, sipping tea while she played the old upright piano in their small living room. "You know," her mother said one night, "your music has become something bigger than just sound. You've touched people's lives." She smiled. "That's all I ever wanted, to make people feel something. To remind them they're not alone." A few weeks later, she received a call from her mentor, the pianist who had trained her. "I have some news," he said. "I've been invited to host a concert that brings together musicians from different walks of life, people who found music in unexpected places. And I want you to be one of them." She was speechless. "Really, you want me to perform?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Not just perform. I want you to close the show." The concert was to be held in a massive theater, with hundreds of seats and a grand piano at the center of the stage. Musicians from around the world were invited, each with their own story of struggle and triumph. On the night of the concert, she stood backstage, her heart pounding. The lights glowed softly and the murmurs of the crowd filled the air. She peeked from behind the curtain and saw rows upon rows of people waiting. Her mentor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said, "don't think about the size of the crowd. Play like you always have, from your soul." When it was finally her turn, she walked out slowly, the applause already beginning. She sat at the piano and took a deep breath.